Okay, here we are back again with Paul, my new friend from London, who has been introducing this, what we call the Jerusalem thesis, looking at Jewish antecedents to what Islam has then incorporated and what Islam has taken and introduced and put into their environment. So I should be pointing this stretch into what the Islamic traditions have done, has taken all these stories from Judaism and has introduced them into Arabia, into Mecca and Medina, places like that. We saw with the shaving of the heads that whole thing to do with the Masjid al-Haram, it is not a shaving of heads that was unique to Mecca. It actually is a shaving of heads, the Nazarite tradition of shaving of heads. We looked at the elephants and the story that you have in the traditions that is referred to in Surah 105, that according to the traditions happened way down in Yemen with the Himyar, the people of Himyar coming up and taking and bringing up their elephants all the way up to Mecca. That could not have happened in Arabia, but that did happen much further north, 1,000 miles further north, with the Seleucids attacking Jerusalem during the time of the Maccabee Wars, the Maccabean brothers. So that is from the intertestamental period, hundreds of miles earlier and hundreds of miles further north. So what Islam tends to do is they grab something from Judaism and they bring it down to Mecca, which you cannot do because you've got the wrong place, the wrong environment, the wrong geography, the wrong topography, and in this case, even the wrong types of food. In order to accommodate huge elephants, you need to have fertile food. You need to have water, and this does not exist in a very desert environment. So now we're going to go to the name Muhammad. And thanks again, Paul, for coming back. All right, let's go to Muhammad itself. What do we know about Muhammad?
Yes, this all takes place against the background of my thesis, my overarching thesis here, that the Masjid al-Haram is the Jerusalem temple. And in previous videos, I and Mel and other people have gone through list by list, item by item on the list, all the attributes of the Masjid al-Haram that all fit the Jerusalem temple. And now I'm going through some other aspects that point at the Jerusalem temple, even though they're not particularly related to the Masjid al-Haram. They are still in the Quran and they relate to the Jerusalem temple. And the more times that the Jerusalem temple is referred to, or Jerusalem itself, the more times it's referred to within the Quran, the more likely it is that the Masjid al-Haram is a reference to the Jerusalem temple. And one reference is in the name Muhammad. Muhammad appears 4 times within the Quran, and also a word of the same root appears on a 5th occasion. I don't propose to go into the full analysis of the way in which the word is used in the Quran. I'm simply looking at the word itself, and particularly at one aspect of it, its connection to the Jerusalem temple. Well, on the screen you see the Quranic consonantal text, the rasm of Muhammad written down. The reading from right to left is an MHMD, or the Arabic equivalent, and you see in the Latin script underneath MHMD Muhammad. Well, it's generally rendered now as the word Muhammad or Muhammad. It would be normal, although there are of course many variations on it. My first observation, however, this is Muhammad. This is how one would normally add the vowels, but of course the vowels weren't written down in the earliest Arabic manuscripts of the Quran. And so these are only suppositions. These are the short vowels were only added a very long time later. Well, Andreas Kaplony wrote an article which I found it online, so I'm sure anyone else can find it online. It's a long title. It says, "The Orthography and Pronunciation of Arabic Names and Terms in the Greek Petra Nasana, Kura, and Senutios letters, brackets from the 6th to the 8th century CE. And this is an article that he wrote in 2015. Now, the title of the article might not set most people's pulse racing, but what is really good is the glossary at the back when he talks about Arabic terms that are used in these letters. So basically, he's found a lot of letters dating from the 6th to the 8th century. That's before the vowels were put into the Quran manuscripts. And in some of these letters, it's got an Arabic text, and then it also has a Greek translation underneath. So what he's looking at is how the Arabic text is translated into Greek. Now, the Arabic text would only have the consonants, the M, the H, the M, and the D, so to speak, whereas the Greek text, they would have vowels in. So when back in the 6th to the 8th centuries, how were people using the vowels? What vowels were people choosing to put in there when Muhammad was written in Greek? And he finds 6 different transliterations. So I've put the MHMD in pink, and then you see underneath the 6 different variations that he finds within these letters, and the rest of the script identifies particular letters and where they are. Sometimes we don't need to go too much into those details. The important thing is the way. And so what do we have here? I've simply copied and pasted them and put them into a different font and made them a little bit larger. And then with a bit of coloring, we can see the M, and the D, or sometimes it's a T at the end. But you see that there are 6 different variants, and in every single one of them, the first vowel is an A, or sometimes it's a long A, and sometimes it is spelled with a double A, and sometimes it's a single A. But in every single instance in the 6th to 8th century letters, Mahmud was converted into Greek script with an A as its first vowel. So we shouldn't really talk about Muhammad. We can talk about Muhammad when we are talking about the character from the traditional Islamic narrative, but we shouldn't talk about Muhammad if we're trying to understand these verses of the Quran, or trying to understand what the Quran meant in its original setting. We should talk about Muhammad. Well, we start with the book of Exodus and the 10 Commandments, and this, or one of the commandments, or in fact 2 of the commandments, are thou shalt not covet. We are told, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's goods, and thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife. And this very powerful word, covet, is the English translation of the Hebrew word chamad. Well, in the book of Ezekiel, chapter 24, there are 3 references to a word, or 3 uses of a word that is derived from chamad. And this is generally rendered the delight of your eyes. And it's used 3 times when God is comparing Ezekiel's wife, who Ezekiel is told will soon die, with the Jerusalem temple, which Ezekiel is told will soon be destroyed. Ezekiel is, of course, very well known for predicting or for foreseeing the resurrection of the dead. And so he is told, do not grieve for the delight of your eyes, meaning your wife, with the meaning that she will one day be resurrected. And similarly, he's told, do not grieve for the temple, because the temple also will be rebuilt. And the word that is used here comes from chamad, but it has an M prefix, so to speak, turning it into a I forget what the actual grammatical term is, but it makes it a personification, really. It says Machmad, so the Machmad of your eyes. It's translated as the delight of your eyes, but Gabriel Said Reynolds has offered the translation of the longed for one, which I think captures this idea of tenderness and absence. So you're feeling tender for something that's not actually there. The Machmad, you're coveting, but obviously without the negative associations of coveting. You're desiring, you're wanting.
May I just interject here, Paul? I don't know if you're going to bring this up. I can't remember, but in Song of Solomon 5:16, Mahmad is repeated, and there it is, altogether lovely, the translation for Mahmad.
That is absolutely right. Absolutely right, Jay. That is why you introduce the next. Oh,
I'm sorry.
Graphic.
Right.
No, you're ahead of the game, ahead of the curve. Yes, in the Song of Songs in chapter 5, the Shulamite bride is giving this beautiful speech, which incidentally I had read at my wedding to my dear wife, and she's the Shulamite bride is talking about her lover, and so it's a very romantic, very evocative passage, and she's talking about how wonderful and perfect he is in every way, and it may have originally involved elements of a love poem, possibly as a little bit erotic, a little bit naughty in parts, but it also has been used, incorporated and adapted to make it an allegory for the Jerusalem temple and for God's relationship with man, rather like in a theme that Jesus would later pick up with the parable of the wedding feast and so on. So returning to the Song of Songs, chapter 5, she says about her beloved, his head is pure gold, his locks are palm fronds, black as the raven, his eyes are like doves beside running waters. His teeth would seem bathed in milk, set like jewels. His cheeks are like beds of spice with ripening aromatic herbs. His lips are red blossoms, they drip with myrrh. His arms are rods of gold adorned with chrysolites. His body is a work of ivory covered with sapphires. His legs are columns of marble resting on golden bases. His stature is like the trees of Lebanon, imposing as the cedars. His mouth is sweetness itself. He is altogether desirable. Such is my lover and such my friend, O daughters of Jerusalem. So a beautiful little passage.
May I ask you, Paul, when you did this in your wedding ceremony, you were referring to yourself in all of these?
Yes, well, that's the way I think that my wife thinks of me. Yes. Whether that's reality, I don't know. Sometimes love is blind, and sometimes it enables you to see things that other people can't see.
Can we ask her to come and see if she still supports every one of these categories?
I think she's resting at the moment. So
how convenient.
Perhaps that would be a rather risky strategy. Right. So the word he is altogether desirable. We get this word again, Machmadim.
It's actually,
and as I say,
it's actually
Machmadim. I ask everyone to adopt as a rule for life, never to look down on anyone who mispronounces a word, because what it means is they learned it from a book. So there's no shame in mispronouncing a word. Right. This is obviously a romantic poem, but as I say, it's also an allegory for God's relationship with his people, a very close, very moving one. And it also has a particular resonance in relation to the Jerusalem temple. You see, it talks about his legs are columns of marble resting on golden bases. His stature is like the trees of Lebanon, I think, imposing as the cedars. I think cedars of Lebanon are incorporated in the Jerusalem temple in some way. And you also see at the end, this is all set in Jerusalem. So although these are very different passages of the Bible, Ezekiel is mourning his dying wife, seemingly late in life, whereas the Shulamite bride is much earlier in her relationship. Both of them are using the same word with essentially the same meaning. It means the longed for one, with a particular reference to a spouse, but also with a particular double meaning with a reference to the Jerusalem temple within the context of its absence. It's longed for not because it's there in front of you, because it's longed for because it's not there. Ezekiel's wife is dead. The Shulamite bride's lover is not present. She's looked for him and he's not there. These are longing for something that's not there, and is to console, I think, the Israelite people or the Jewish people for the time they do not have a temple. Now, one could and should extend this forward to Jesus, because I think that when Muhammad is used in the Quran, I think that there is also a Jesus connection here, but I don't need to go there for the purposes of this presentation. What I do note is that in all these videos, in all this series we've been looking at the specific attributes of the Masjid al-Haram, the fact that it's God's house, the fact that it's associated with Bakka, the fact that it's a cube, the fact that it's pointed out to Abraham and it's somewhere where Abraham built something, and it's the capital or the center of the Jewish people, and that it's the destination of the Hajj pilgrimage with their sacrifice and their circumambulation, shaving of heads, wearing of garlands, and going between Safa and Marwa. We've done all these specific references. In addition, we've talked about two additional things that aren't particularly attributes of the Masjid al-Haram, but nevertheless put the Quran very much, or put Jerusalem very much front and center of the Quran authors or primary authors' worldview. We looked at the eschatological landscape of Jerusalem with the valley of Gehenna, which is referred to in the Quran as Jahannam, something like 101 times, 77 times as Gehenna, and a further 24 times as a variation of that word. So the Quran author, by use of the word Jahannam, is fixing his message very much in the real physical landscape of Jerusalem. We also looked in the last video that I recorded at the elephant, and we talked about, or I talked about how the Surah 105, talking about see how God dealt with the companions of the elephants, is in fact a reference to the second book of Maccabees, when the Seleucids were besieging Jerusalem with elephants. And now, for a third time, we see Jerusalem. We see the Quran's author, or possibly a later editor, adopting the name Muhammad for the author. And this name, Muhammad, is in fact a biblical epithet for the destroyed Jerusalem temple. It was the destroyed Jerusalem temple in the time of Ezekiel. Not quite sure when the Song of Songs was written, but the implication is that it's not there because the Shulamite bride is looking for her lover. And the Jerusalem temple was still destroyed in the time when the Quran was being written, and it was actually put beyond the reach of any Jew or any Abrahamic follower who wanted to go there, because it had been occupied by the Sasanians during the Byzantine-Sasanian War, and it wasn't available for them to go to. So time after time, we don't just go through these 7 or 8 or 9 specific attributes of the Masjid al-Haram, but there are other passages within the Quran in relation to Jahannam, in relation to the elephants, and in relation to the Quran author's supposed name or title, Muhammad, that place it very much in Jerusalem, put Jerusalem absolutely front and center of the Quran author's thoughts and his worldview. It's the Jerusalem that he's interested in, and it's Jerusalem that all the references to the Masjid al-Haram should be interpreted as.
Okay, thank you. And I'm going to ask you just to unpack a little bit more that last idea. I want to hear a little bit more about this idea of the fact that you're saying that the Mahmad, the lovely one, the temple, the idea of Mahmad being the temple is unavailable to the Jews. How then does that then get incorporated into the word Mahmad? Where does or maybe let me put it a different way. How does that then get borrowed or taken over by the Arabs or those who then are the precursors to Islam?
Well, my belief, and it's not an original idea, is that in the Quran author's mind, or the principal Quran author's mind, I think the Quran has undergone some editing, but I think that most of it was the work of one person, and that somebody came along and edited it at a subsequent stage. But I think in its original form, the title Muhammad might have been used as an epithet for Jesus, but a messianic, eschatological. It's Jesus who is longed for. It's Jesus who will return. You will recall that there are 2 elements that I suggest to Muhammad in Ezekiel and the Song of Songs. One is that it's absent, is somebody who's not there, and secondly, there's a spousal image. Well, Jesus. So you've got the temple and you've got the spousal image. So it's both Ezekiel's wife, or the Shunammite bride's lover, and it's also, in both cases, it's also the temple. Well, Jesus associates himself with the temple quite explicitly in the Gospels. Jay, you're the preacher; you will have it at your fingertips in a way that I don't. But he compares himself with the temple and his death.
Yeah. Destroyed in 3 days, I'll rise it again, referring
That's
to
right.
Coming back from Friday to Sunday. Yeah.
And Jesus also uses spousal imagery. He talks about the wedding feast. He talks about the parable of the wedding feast, and he also talks about the parable of the bridesmaids. Yeah. Where the idea is that the church is the bride of Christ, right. And so these 2 ideas of associating Muhammad, associating it with the temple, but using a spousal image, also with the third element of being missing and being absent and longed for and waiting for it to return, it seems to fit perfectly Jesus as a model. So my belief is that when Muhammad is used within the Quran, it was initially used as a reference for Jesus. And then at some stage, possibly the author adopted the title for himself, and he decided that he was in fact the longed for one. He was going to adopt that title for himself. We're going a little bit off script here, but I think there is good evidence that there was somebody leading armies in the Middle East in the 630s who was called Muhammad or Muhammad. We have sources such as Jacob of Edessa, Thomas the Presbyter, or the Gospel, the British Library Gospel fragment, or the Common Syriac source. There's enough evidence there that persuades me that there was somebody going around calling himself Muhammad, and he was leading an army, and he was looking to capture Jerusalem. And it seems to me that this is, but when you read the Quran, that's not so obvious. When you read the Muhammad in the Quran, it seems to be a reference to Jesus. At one stage, I don't have the verse in my at the front of my mind, but it uses precisely the same words for Muhammad as it then uses on a separate occasion for Jesus. The part where it says prophets have died before me. He is not but a messenger. Prophets have died before him, or something along those lines. He's naught but a messenger. And Edward Gales, I think, made the point. Why on earth would the Quran say that Muhammad is naught but a messenger? What would people think he was? What idea is he trying to refute? And I think the answer is that he was using Muhammad there as a reference for Jesus, and he's saying that Jesus was naught but a messenger. But later on, he adopts a title for himself. He or somebody else adopts a title for himself and leads an army under that name. Okay. A complicated story, Jay. To really get it down to its basics, my thesis here is Muhammad really places the Quran at Jerusalem. It's not the Jesus element is more complex. How a person might have used the word is more complex, but it's definitely about Jerusalem, and it's about the Jerusalem temple. It fits Jerusalem and all the other evidence perfectly. It's not some random name, the praised one or God's favored one. That's it.
Okay. I mean, there's an awful lot that you brought there that we will not agree upon, you and I, but that's fine. I think what you've done is you put it out there as a green paper, which we need to then move into a white paper. And this will be always a very contentious subject, because the name Muhammad is so central and foundational for Islam. Muslims will say that this is the man Muhammad. There's no way you can get around it. What you're suggesting is, no, we need to look back and see where this is found in much earlier precedents for it. And of course, you're referring to Andres Kaplani in his article, where he looks at the letters written written in Greek, the vowels that are included, because it is Greek. And then you moved into where you find Muhammad in the Bible. And I think you looked at Ezekiel 24, you look at Exodus 20, and you look at Song of Solomon 5:16. These are well-known references to Machmad or Hamad. Both could be also the coveted one, or the delight of your eyes, or the altogether lovely, referring to the bride, the one that has been lost and has not been retrieved. And then you're also bringing the idea of the temple, the idea that this is also could be referring to the temple. Fascinating, because the longed for one, the temple that is longed for, is a good definition of that. And if that is the case, then you need to bring it into the 7th century, and that's the question I wanted to bring out. The 7th century, then Muhammad is, or not Muhammad, but Muhammad is then introduced. Possibly, what Mel has found is this might be Umar himself. Umar, who is the one that Thomas the Presbyter is referring to. Umar, the one that the Doctrina Iacobi is referring to, because it's 634. And also Sabaeus, the writings of Sabaeus, the Chronicle of Sabaeus in 660 is referring to. Could be him, because there's no Muhammad that we know of that from Mecca, Medina, that went up to Jerusalem. The traditional Muhammad, the one that we do know about today, the Islamic Muhammad, never went up to Jerusalem, did not receive a sword. He would not refer to himself as holding the keys to paradise, which comes from the book of Matthew. So all of these seem to suggest that there is a person in the 7th century who did refer to himself as Muhammad, but he is not, of course, the Muhammad of tradition. What you're suggesting is fascinating, because you are looking at the etymological structure of the word itself in the Bible and showing etymologically there is a history for this. If there's a history of this, why are we then surprised that this is not then used to refer to Jesus Christ? That's what you're saying. Am I correct on that? That this could be from those in the 7th century and 8th century referring to Jesus Christ himself?
Yeah, I think I'm rather turning a Muslim apologist position into reverse, because I think Muslims sometimes I've seen Muslims argue that these references in Ezekiel and Song of Songs are about the Bible predicting Muhammad, and they would say
that's one of their favorites. Certainly, Song.
Yeah, they would say, oh yes, Muhammad lived down in the Hijaz, and he Is that beer, Jay?
I'm going to have to do from here on out. This is what I'm going to do as my default response to that. Anytime they try to say, see, that's Muhammad there, the altogether lovely one, but I'm saying, no, that's actually Paul Elwood. You used it in his, in his
yes, but I'm turning their argument kind of against them, because they would say, oh, well, Ezekiel and the author of the Song of Songs, Solomon, they are predicting Muhammad arising in Mecca and Medina and in the Hijaz. I don't believe that's how. I don't think that's how ancient scriptures work. But the answer is that they're half true. But it's the prophet or the author of the Quran who has gone to these works and found the name Muhammad, and he has then incorporated it as an epithet for Jesus. And then he has then gone, or he or somebody else has then gone and adopted that title for himself. But so there is a connection there, but it's not about confirming the traditional Islamic narrative. It does the opposite of confirming it. It completely destroys it, because the whole point of Muhammad in Ezekiel and the Song of Songs is that it's about the Jerusalem temple. It's not about somebody in the Hijaz. It couldn't be, because it has to be the Jerusalem temple.
Good stuff. Excellent. I love this. And I love what you're doing, Paul. Not only are you taking it etymologically and looking at it biblically and showing where the antecedents and how it evolved, you're also trying to say, how is it that, why is it that the Muslims now have adopted this name? And why is it that we now see it all over? Well, we don't see it in scripture. Isn't that interesting? We only see it 4 times within the Quran itself. All the other places, it is nothing more than an attribution to Muhammad, and they have to put it in parentheses. This is going to be fun. So what's next? What are we going to look to next?
Well, I thought we might pause and have just a review and try and take a rather more holistic view of the Quran and say, okay, I think I've proved my case now. If I was a lawyer, I think I've stopped adducing evidence, because I've now called witness after witness after witness to give them evidence, and I've got physical evidence, and I've produced all the evidence. It's now time to make a bit of a closing speech to the jury and say how all the evidence fits together, and to make it plausible, and to say, well, how do we approach the Quran, knowing now, as I think we must know, that it's that the Masjid al-Haram is Jerusalem and not Mecca.
Okay, that's the next time. God bless you. Terrific to have you on board. People, write your comments below. Respond to what Paul is saying here, and let's see where we go from it. The next time we come, we're actually going to put it all together and wrap it all up, and then we're going to introduce some yet more material once we have put and seen where Paul is going to in this category, the Jerusalem thesis. Thank you, Paul.
Great.
Good to have you on board.
Thank you.
This is Jay and Paul, over and out.